Okay, so I'm going to skip to a text that is from the Talmud that tells us a very interesting story that we're going to try to answer through this class. Or sorry, we're going to try to decipher and unpack through the class that we want to talk about tonight. The subject is, what is the impact of a specific mitzvah and what is the impact of a specific action? Forgive me for this. I'm trying to get to the right slide. There it is. No, it's not it. Sorry. All right. We'll get to that. I don't want to take your time and search for that slide. So, but the subject matter of tonight's class is, how do we value the impact of our actions? Very often we struggle with the amount of commitment and the amount of energy we should put into a specific meeting, a specific mitzvah, or just about anything that we do. In fact, part of the challenges of life is determining how to invest our time and what the impact is going to be. And the text I wanted to show you, the text that we're going to get to eventually, I just couldn't find the right slide, is a story of the Talmud where it talks about some of the greatest sages of their times and how they reacted to the commandment and to the inspiration that they should gravitate to Torah and mitzvahs. And it talks about how they each went to a different place within Israel, and one even went to Rome. And we're going to use that as a springboard to understand what it means to really play a role in the perfection of the world. We all know that our ultimate goal is the coming of Mashiach. We all know that the ultimate goal is a peaceful world, a world that is where godliness is revealed, and everyone and everything recognizes the godliness that powers it, and we're all united. That's why it says the wolf shall lie with the lamb, and it says that nations will not raise a sword from one to the other. We all know that that's the ultimate goal, and believe it or not, it is on us to make that happen. We are the people are the ones who bring about that perfection. Obviously, Hashem does his part with the miracles, but that gets brought on by the actions of the people. And we're going to use that to learn about our own personal actions and our own individual mitzvos that we may or may not think are significant. So I'm not going to read the whole text here, but this is the part where Hashem commands Moshe, and now Moshe is relaying the commandment to the people. This is the night before they leave Egypt. So this is the day before Passover. This is the 14th day of Nisan, and the actual Exodus takes place the next day. And Moshe gave them two mitzvos. The mitzvah of circumcision, which was only performed by some, and the other mitzvah, which is the famous one, is the mitzvah of sacrificing the sheep. They had the sheep tied to their bed for 4 days, and now they were going to sacrifice it and partake in the Pesach and the Passover sacrifice. And more importantly, they were going to paste the blood from the sacrifice on the doorposts of their homes. And that's going to be a way to protect them from the plague of the firstborn, which was about to take place. We all know the story. That's why I'm not going to read the text, but you're welcome to read it while it's on the screen, or if you have the books. But this is the commandment that Moshe gave the people. Now, the question is why? Why did they have to do this before? Why couldn't they just get out of Egypt first? Let's solve the problem, and then we'll deal with, doing the mitzvahs. So Rashi brings a medrash where the explanation is given. So Rabbi Masya, who we're going to talk about soon, not just here, but also in a further text. So he would say that Hashem basically said, it's time now, the time has come to fulfill the oath that I swore to Abraham, that I'm going to redeem his children, and they're going to be redeemed from Egypt. But what's the problem? The Jewish people have no merits. In other words, they don't have any they don't have an identity that sorry, I'm trying to find the right word here. They don't have a distinction that makes them worthy of the Exodus. And the verse in Yecheskel that you are naked and bare is referring to spiritual naked and bare, meaning that there's no merits that make it that make it worthwhile, or make them worthy of redemption. So what did Hashem do? He gave them two mitzvahs: the blood of Passover and the blood of circumcision. That they were to circumcise themselves. That was the first mitzvah. That was a personal thing. And then the communal thing, which was also a family thing and a personal thing, was the mitzvah of sacrificing the lamb for the Korban Pesach, for the Pesach sacrifice. And within the merit of these two mitzvahs, these two commandments, is what brought about the redemption the following day, ending the 86-year slavery. Okay. But the question is, why those mitzvahs? What is unique about those mitzvahs? This is still a continuation, but it's part of the same thread. Is that what merit do the Israelites, the Jewish people, have that they should go out of Egypt? So I have great things dependent on this Exodus. For at the end of the 3 months, in other words, when it comes to Shavuos, they're going to have received the Torah. So this is happening anyways. But they have to do something to make it worthy of their redemption and make them worthy of receiving the Torah. And those two mitzvahs was the sort of the springboard that gave them that merit. And this is the mitzvah of circumcision, but we're gonna go to the general idea of mitzvahs. Many people ask, and we all have this question whether we ask it or not, but like, why does God need sacrifices? What does God, the idea of a sacrifice to God in the Beis Hamikdash, they would take an animal, they would kill the animal, and they would follow all of these steps and burn the animal or burn part of it on the Mizbeach, on the altar in the Beis Hamikdash. On a similar situation, this is what they did in Egypt in a way to bring about the redemption. So if it comes to bris milah, if it comes to circumcision, that actually makes sense. Okay? Because circumcision, it's still a chayk, it's still a mitzvah that we don't understand fully, at least. But the idea of circumcision is that you are creating a bond between the person and Hashem. That's why we do it at 8 days old, because that we're taking the physical existence of the person and we're saying there's a bond that is forever lasting and eternal through this circumcision, and we are circumcising the fact that our materialism and our existence is dedicated to Hashem. So there's an explanation, at least. There's a connection between circumcision and the redemption. But what does a sacrifice have to do with, like how does a sacrifice make them worthy of redemption? And more importantly, on a more general sense, why does Hashem need, or care for sacrifices? Like, what is the accomplishment in the world when a sacrifice happens? It says about Sukkos that we bring 70 sacrifices on the 7 days of Sukkos. Why? Because we are trying to bring merit to all 70 nations, and it actually does merit them spiritually. So the sacrifices obviously did something, but what? Why? It's one of the hardest mitzvahs to understand, or at least to explain in modern times. What is the uniqueness of a sacrifice? So this text over here, if in shul very often at the end of davening, so before someone has to say Kaddish, the last Kaddish, the Rabbanan, so we say a Mishnah. In Chabad, we have a tradition to say the Mishnah from the tractate of mikvahos, of mikvah. But at the end of the Mishnah, we always recite this end of a Mishnah, which is actually from the tractate of Makos. And this Mishnah is just to make sure you to help you recognize it. And then Kaddish de Rabbana, right? So hopefully you can recognize that. What does it mean? Well, let's look at the translation. That the mitzvos, Hashem wanted to give merit to the people. In other words, that they should have their own merit, not that they have gifts and they have things happening to them, but they should actually do something to merit whatever is happening to them. So what did he do? He increased the Torah and mitzvos and gave them as many Torah mitzvos as he possibly can, in a way that they could have many merits. It's very interesting. This is controversial, but it's a little bit interesting how some religions or a specific religion likes to say that, in the idea of being founded on Judaism, but now they don't have to do the mitzvahs because now all you have to do is, accept so and so. It defeats the whole purpose of why Hashem gave us the mitzvahs in the first place. The more mitzvahs we have, the more merits we can accomplish. We don't want less, we want more. Yes, some of them are very difficult, and some of them are very taxing, and some of them are very hard to do right. But at the same time, the reason why we have them in the first place is to achieve those merits that Hashem wants to give us. So that's a general introduction to the answer of sacrifices. But let us break it down further. So the sacrifice and the mitzvah of Brit Milah was coming to solve two problems. One, that they didn't deserve the redemption, but also they were so deep in negativity, in idol worship, and in the impurity of Egypt, that it was almost impossible for them to be redeemed. They were impossible to reach a level that they could. It says actually that if they remained in Egypt for one more moment, they would have reached the 50th gate of impurity, and it would be impossible for them to be redeemed. Not impossible, but that's what Kabbalah says. So, on the one hand, they had no merits. On the other hand, they were about to be drowned in impurity. So they had two problems. And here's the Zohar telling us about how bad it was. The Jews became spiritually contaminated in Egypt. They sank into deeper levels of impurity until they descended into the 49th level of impurity. And when Hashem took them out, he basically broke all 49 levels of impurity to break them out. But how does that happen? There has to be effort on the part of the human being. There has to be something that happens. The Torah was given on Mount Sinai, which was a mountain. Climbing any mountain is very difficult. Moshe was 80 years old, and God told Moshe to climb the mountain. Why couldn't God just descend a few feet lower and give Moshe the Torah where he was? Why did he have to climb the mountain? And the understandable answer is that regardless of every gift that we get or everything that we have to be able to put in the effort. So the Jewish people had to put in the effort in order to be redeemed from this impurity. But it was a double challenge. One is that they needed a merit to be redeemed, but two, they needed a way to undo the 49 levels of impurity. It's one thing to have a merit, a schus, a merit to be redeemed, but you also have to undo the mistakes. So, for example, let's just make it practical. If, let's say, we do something to our partner, to our spouse, or to someone that we love, and we hurt them through something that we do, right? So we want to buy them a gift. So let's just say we buy them a gift to try to make up for for the pain we caused them. We give them the gift, we wrap it up, we write a very heartfelt note, and we hand it over to them. So hopefully they'll appreciate the gift and they'll forgive you, and it will rekindle the relationship. But at the same time, depending on what person did to cause the hurt in the first place, that has to be rectified. The gift only helps so much. If there was damage that the person did, they have to fix that damage. So let's say it was something they shouldn't have done, so they'll say, I'll never do it again. Or they have to work on themselves, or whatever it has to be, whatever that action is. It's not enough just to give a gift. You have to fix the damage that was done. And that's how the Jewish people were right before the Exodus. On the one hand, they needed to give a gift to God in order to merit the redemption. But on the other hand, they also had to undo the damage that was done from the sinking into the impurity of Egypt. So how does the sacrifice and the bris milah correspond with undoing that damage? So let's take a look. This is one of the commentaries and one of the explanations that help us understand this. Our sages have a tradition that the Jewish people were so contaminated with the profanity of Egypt. By the time the eve of Passover had arrived, they had entered into the 49th chamber of impurity. Had they crossed over into the 50th, they would have passed the point of no return. And this is the deeper meaning of the words in the Haggadah, that had Hashem not taken our forefathers out of Egypt, we and our children and our grandchildren would still be enslaved to Pharaoh and Egypt. I always never understood that, because, does that mean the empire of Egypt would last forever? What if they didn't? Then we would be freed. So like how do we say that we would still be enslaved in Egypt? Because had we not been redeemed, the level of impurity that we would have reached would have been so bad that it would be irreversible. And this is why the word Exodus is mentioned in the Torah 50 times. To undo the 49 impurities and then help us get to the final essence. But let's go back to sacrifices. Let's go back to understanding what a sacrifice accomplishes, because that was one of the questions we had in the beginning. Why does God want our sacrifices? And what do sacrifices really accomplish? So let's understand the 49 levels of impurity. What was the impurity that we're talking about? So back to the prosecutors, to the spiritual prosecutors of the Jewish people, that when it was time for them to leave Egypt, let's take a look in the text. So the leader of them all, the Satan himself, stood up as the master of the universe. At this point, these people are also idolaters. So why would you split the sea for them? They're no better than the Egyptians. So why do they deserve a miracle? Now, lo and behold, what was the number one idol? Sorry, what was the number two idol in Egypt? Number one idol was the Nile River. What was the number two idol? Sheep. Sheep were worshipped. Don't ask me why, but that was a reality. So, in a nutshell, the sacrifice of the sheep was undoing the idol worship of the Jewish people during their time in Egypt. What was the process of undoing? What was the sacrifice process of undoing this idol worship? The first, they had to take a sheep. All right, they're slaves. They don't necessarily have access to animals that easily. So they get a sheep. They have to walk the sheep to their home or to wherever they live. And they had to tie the sheep to their bed for 4 days. And if they were asked by an Egyptian slave master, what are you doing? They would have to answer, God told us that we need to tie the sheep to our bed for 4 days because we are going to slaughter it for a Pesach sacrifice. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the Egyptians hearing that that the slaves are about to sacrifice their idol? And then once it came time to sacrifice the sheep, they couldn't just do it in their backyard quietly. They couldn't just have a little low key. They had to paint the blood on the doorpost. They had to show what they're doing. They had to let the Egyptians know, hey, here's what we did. We took your idol, you slaughtered it to our God, to the only God. Take that. Okay, before I go any further, let's go to the next text. So the process of fixing a problem or fixing damage, because remember, we said before, a gift is a nice gesture that hopefully mends a relationship, but it's not going to fix damage if there is damage. So how do you get past in this picture, we'll use this. How do you get past the gap between the damage and the correction? So there's a verse in Tehillim that we know, but we also use it, called Sur Meira Naseh Tov, which basically means steer away from evil and do good. There's 2 steps to getting out of the rut, getting out of the negativity, the first thing is to prevent yourself from doing anything bad, steer away from bad decisions, steer away from negative environments, negative people, negative information, negative things that will maybe lead you to do something wrong. So that's step number 1. But that's not enough. Step number 2 is to focus on aseh tov, focus on doing good, focus on doing positive things. So the mitzvah of a bris milah, that was aseh tov. But the Sur Meira, the steering away from negativity, was brought about by the Korban Pesach, because what they were doing is they were undoing the bad decisions of idol worship that were done until then by showing how even sheep are subservient to God. In fact, Moshe was very nervous. Moshe was very concerned when Hashem gave them this mitzvah, telling them to take the sheep to their bed. Moshe said that this is their Lord, this is their idols, this is their deity. They're going to stone us. And he had every right to be concerned. So what exactly was Hashem trying to accomplish by this by this mitzvah of telling them to sacrifice the sheep. It's not just the act itself, but it's the attitude of how you go about doing this mitzvah. In Judaism, there are many things that one could decide to do that feel very good. All right, we all have mitzvahs that we like, that we enjoy. Okay, one person may really enjoy Shabbos, another person may enjoy kosher food, another person may enjoy Passover for some reason, but everyone has a mitzvah that they could enjoy. But there are a lot of mitzvahs that, let's be honest, are not so enjoyable. A lot of mitzvahs that are hard to keep. Now, unfortunately, there are movements today that instead of acknowledging that these are hard mitzvahs to do, but we'll at least do what we can to get there, they sort of brought those difficult mitzvahs or rewrote those difficult mitzvahs in a sense that they're now catering to our own feelings, catering to our own needs, catering to whatever we want the outcome to be. But the problem with that is that eventually that leads us to only worrying and only focusing on what is good for us. And that's what idol worship is. The underlying problem, the underlying cause of idol worship is not that idol worshippers believed in God. They believed in the one God. But they also believe that one God doesn't really care about their little self, and they need to have a more relatable God to give them what they need right now. They need to talk to the ministers. They need to talk to the one in charge of the finances, or the one in charge of the rain, or the one in charge of the dew, or the one in charge of whatever it is that they wanted, because it's all about what I could get from it. And that's where idol worship that's what takes people to idol worship. The Jew is expected to rise above that and say that not only don't we worship idols because we believe that God is everything and everywhere, but also because we don't care about what we get from it. We're not doing this for the benefits that come from it. We're doing this because we want to connect to God and be a part of God's mission. And that's the attitude that was necessary and needed to undo the idol worship of the Jewish people in Egypt until then. Now let's take a look at this text. And this is from Rashi on this parsha, where it talks about how this was an idol worship. So the Ta'eva means like it translates it as the deity, but it's more than that. Ta'eva means like the I guess, this is the representation of the Egyptians' belief, right? And it quotes the verse, and for the milcom, the admonition of the children of Amnon. In other words, they this is referring to the same level, the type of idol worship that the children of Amnon would follow. But for the Jews, it's unacceptable. It's idol worship, because for a Jew, it's not that you can't justify it's not just that you're worshiping the idol, but you can't justify an act where your whole purpose is self-serving, where everything that you do is about what you can get from it. Utilitarian, I think, is the right word. So unfortunately, the Jewish people were passionately fond of this idolatry, and Moshe said to them, withdraw from this idol worship and take for yourselves. In other words, withdraw from idolatry and take for yourselves a sheep for the mitzvah. So you're now taking the same sheep that you used to worship, and you're now going to do a mitzvah with it. You're now going to elevate it and undo the damage that you've done with this idol worship until now, which means you're going to realize that your life, your existence, your commitments are to Hashem, regardless of what might happen to you, regardless of what benefit you might get out of it. And two, you're not going to be afraid to showcase and display and be proud of who you are and what you represent. I was meeting with someone earlier this week, and I was trying to convince them to put up a mezuzah, and they kept on begging me to figure out a way to have the mezuzah on the inside of the door, not the outside of the door. It's a very unfortunate and sad, thing sometimes, is that we become very nervous and worried about displaying and showcasing our Judaism, and that was honestly the first thing that defined the Jewish people as a nation. Was God told them, go and be proud and do the mitzvah with joy and pride, and don't be afraid or ashamed of what you are doing. So now we have the answer. The famous Al-Shech, which is the commentary on the Torah, gives us the crux of the answer. It was necessary for Hashem to give the Jewish people these two mitzvahs. For as is well known, the Jewish people worship the Lamb. For an idolater to achieve redemption, two things are required. One is they have to remove the filth of impurity, and thereafter be inducted into the halls of holiness, similar to the twin notions of Aseh Tov, do good, and Sor Meirah, which means turn away from evil. So the impurity of idolatry was removed through the blood of the Pesach lamb, of the Pesach sacrifice, namely slaughtering the Egyptian deity. This is alluded to in the verse, withdraw and take for yourselves. Withdraw, meaning stop, Sor Meirah, go away from the bad, go away from this idolatry, and take for yourselves and do the mitzvah. But this is not enough, because after the impurity was removed, the people still needed to be sort of reconnected with their godly service and with Hashem, revealing their neshama. And how do you do that? Through circumcision, through the bris milah, because that sort of finalizes the connection and the bond that the Jewish people are meant to have with Hashem. And only then could they be redeemed. Okay. I'm going to skip this because I want to go to this next piece here. This is the text that I was looking for when we first started the class. And this is really the taking the lesson onto a personal level. So this is from the Gemara. It's actually one of the first tractate of Brachos. Those of you who do Daf Yomi with Rabbi Cohen, hope maybe you'll remember this. So it says, Daver ba'aznav, in this week's parsha, it says, speak to the ears of the people. So the students of Rabbi Yanai said, what does this mean? They gave an explanation. Please, daber na, speak please. The word na in the second word of the verse means please. Why did Hashem say please? Because I'm begging you to tell the people of Israel, borrow vessels of silver and vessels of gold from the Egyptians, so that the righteous people, Avram, will not say, God fulfilled his pronouncement and they will be enslaved and afflicted, but God did not fulfill his pronouncement, and afterwards they will leave with great possessions. So Hashem was begging them to please take, because the Jewish people wanted to just leave. They wanted to be free. And as my father always likes to say, that, you know, when he visits prisons, very often, the discussion comes up that would you rather be free now or be free in a week with $100,000? And not a single prisoner will ever say, I'll stay here another week for the $100,000. They all want the freedom immediately. So the Jewish people said to Moshe, if only we could get out, let's get out. This is comparable to someone who was incarcerated in prison, and people would say, Tim, we promise we will release you tomorrow and we will give you a lot of money. And the prisoner will say back, wait a second, just let me out today and I don't need anything, just get me out of here. So the idea of being enslaved and being in prison is a very, very difficult thing. And Hashem was begging them to take whatever they can. Why? Here comes the Rebbe. The Rebbe says like this: the purpose of the exile in Egypt was so that the Jewish people could sublimate and thereafter take with them the holy sparks and energy that were buried in Egypt. How do you do that? This is a deeper significance of the fact that Jewish people cleaned out Egypt like a silo without grain and a fishing net without fish. The Jewish people transformed the holy sparks that had been buried in Egypt. And how is that done? Through taking the vessels, taking the wealth, taking the physical items from the Egyptians and elevating them, using them for holiness, is how they would be able to elevate them and reconnect the sparks with their source, with Hashem. And the Rebbe goes on to say the same is true with regard to the future redemption. As the Torah says, it's going to mirror the experience of the Exodus of Egypt. So basically, wherever we are in the world, and anything we come in contact with, any physical item, or even wealth, or something that we have, our cars, our homes, everything that we have it for a reason and for a purpose, because through the elevating the physical item, we could finally come out of this horrific exile. Okay. I'm sorry. By the way, it wasn't the text 9, it was this text that I was looking for. Okay, so the Talmud says like this. Said the famous verse, Tzedek Tzedek Tirdov, which, by the way, does not mean justice. Justice you shall pursue, as everyone translates it, including this translation. The word tzedek comes from tzadik, which was, as we all know, means righteousness. So it's not just justice, but it's righteousness. And how does the Talmud describe, what does it mean you should run after righteousness? So the Talmud says, this teaches that one should follow the sages to the academy where they are found, that you should run after the Chachamim. You should run after the sages of Israel because they are the tzaddikim, they are the righteous, and you want to connect yourself with a righteous person because they will be a living example for you to reach your own merit as well. So the Talmud gives some examples. For example, one, follow Rabbi Eliezer to Lud. Famous Rabbi Eliezer, I think Ben Horkenes, went to Lud. And after Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai to Be'er Chayil. And Rabbi Yeshua went to Pekin. And Rabbi Gamliel went to Yavne. And Rabbi Akiva went to Bnei Brak. And remember before we had Rabbi Masya, the famous Rabbi Masya who gave the reasoning for the two mitzvahs. Rabbi Masya, where did he go? To Rome. And where did Rabbi Hanania ben Teradin go to? He went to Sichni. This is outside of Israel. And Rabbi Yasi went to Sfars. I don't know where that is, but it's also supposed to be out of Israel. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira went to Nitzivin. And which I think Nitzivin was in Israel. After Rabbi Yeshua went to Babylonia, to the exile, and after Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi went to Beis Sha'arim, and if you lived during the time, if you merited living the time during the Beis Hamikdash, you should go to the Lishkas Hagazis, which is the chamber in the Beis Hamikdash, in the Holy Temple, where the sages will sit. What's the Talmud trying to tell us? Why is the Talmud giving us all these places where these sages went? What's the reason? It's what's the point? So the Maram of Rottenberg, one of the Rishonim, so he explains that it must be that in Rome was the Sanhedrin, the highest court of Judaism was in Rome at the time, because there were a lot of Jews in Rome. So it could be Rabbi Masya went to Rome because that's where the Chachamim were. But that's not enough. We need more. So the Rebbe gives an explanation. And I'm not sure what the source is, but the Rebbe apparently has a source, that Rabbi Masya, who went to Rome, would consistently comfort his students about the fact that they lived in Rome. And he would tell them that the future redemption depends on them being in Rome, in a Roman environment. Why? Because to establish a yeshiva within that environment, even though they were in Rome, which is like the capital of modernity and the future and the most, the highest level of individual, but there they should have a yeshiva. And they could find Jews who are stuck in a Roman situation and bring them back to mitzvahs. And if they're beer for mitzvahs, they could bring them out from Roman culture and make them a yeshiva student. And for this reason, Rabbi Masya ben Charash, the yeshiva went to Rome, was specifically in Rome, the hotbed of exile. Why? To reach out to the Roman Jew and in order to bring Mashiach. This is from the Rebbe, by the way. This text here is from the Rebbe. You see where he's going with this pretty clearly. Why would Rabbi Masya go to Rome if he could have found many places in Israel where there are many Jews who need to study Torah? He went to the lowest place that he could find, because he knew there were still Jews there, and he knew that those Jews needed to do a mitzvah. Now, the question obviously could arise: why one mitzvah? Why would you make someone bring someone to do one mitzvah if they can't, let's say, do the mitzvah later? You put tefillin on with someone, or they light Shabbos candles, but they don't continue that mitzvah, let's say, because sometimes Mashiach is dependent on one last mitzvah, that every single person has to have at least a mitzvah. And that was the purpose of, before Egypt, Moshe telling everyone that everyone has to bring a lamb, tie it to their bed, because everyone needs a merit, everyone needs a mitzvah. And therefore we always have to look for the Jews, look for the people, the wanderers, the ones who are bare and naked without any mitzvahs, and offer them the opportunity to even do one mitzvah. And that's how we bring Mashiach. That brings it home. It was necessary. If all that was necessary was for us to leave exile, we would have long ago been absolved of this bitter exile. But Hashem wishes for more. namely that the redemption of every Jew from exile shouldn't be in a matter of bare and naked. It shouldn't just be that there are some Jews that don't have any mitzvahs. God wishes that we should all have mitzvahs. We all have to have merits. So what is the last thing we have to do before Mashiach comes? We have to seek out Jews who are currently holding in a situation of bare and naked spiritually, and gift them with one or two mitzvahs or even more. Not a single Jew will be left behind when Mashiach finally comes. As such, it is imperative that we seek out every single Jewish person, wherever they may be, and ensure that they are in the possession of at least one mitzvah, that they aren't bare. After all, the redemption of the entire Jewish nation is dependent on it. Through this, we will merit the future redemption speedily in our days. There's a story of a Chabad rabbi who was talking to a non-Chabad rabbi, and they were discussing the controversial debates about outreach, about Jewish outreach. I want to tell you that in the 60s and the 70s, when the Rebbe really stepped up his mitzvah campaigns and sending emissaries all over the world, and in the Chabad style of doing one mitzvah, to help someone do one mitzvah, there were many, many Jewish leaders who criticized the Rebbe, some unfortunately very harshly, saying that how could you go put on tefillin with someone who just had pork? Or how could you ask someone to come to your Shabbos meal if you know they're gonna not keep Shabbos? These are sinners. They need to be treated as sinners, and whatever their stupidity was. It got much better through the years, and in fact, many of the same denominations have adopted the Jewish outreach motto. And this non-Chabad rabbi was telling the Chabad rabbi what made him change his mind about asking a Jew to do a mitzvah. Because he says I was very critical of Chabad's style of asking someone to do a mitzvah when you don't know if they're going to keep the mitzvah or not, or follow up with the mitzvah. And here's what happened. The non-Chabad rabbi says, I have a friend who unfortunately lost, he was also a rabbi, he's actually a teacher, and he lost his son. His son passed away. And I went to visit him to be Menachem Avel, to comfort him. And when I came to his house, so a lot of his students were there. Many, or if not all of his students were non-religious. And they approached him and they said, in honor, in merit, in memory of your son, we've all decided that we're going to keep one Shabbos together. And the teacher was overjoyed. And he was so happy and so thankful that they're going to do this mitzvah in the merit of his son. And he was very happy. So this non-Chabad rabbi goes over to his friend afterwards and says, I don't get it. Like, we all know that they're not going to keep next Shabbos. So like, why are you so relieved or happy, or like how does this make you so happy? So the rabbi who lost his son said, you know what I would give just to have one more Shabbos with my son? Just one Shabbos, even if it means that the next Shabbos I won't be together with him. And immediately it hit this rabbi, the value of one mitzvah, the value of one action, of one, without thinking about the next one. And this is why it's so important that we value every single mitzvah and every opportunity to encourage someone else to do a mitzvah, regardless of what we believe or not believe the impact will be. Because every mitzvah counts. Every mitzvah is like a son returning to his father, like a son returning to Hashem. And we have to use every opportunity we have to do a mitzvah and to encourage others to do a mitzvah. And that is what's ultimately going to bring Mashiach. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. And may it be a peaceful Shabbos, but more importantly, may Mashiach finally come and bring peace to the entire world. Shabbos.
Amen.
Hey,
Good Shabbos, Rabbi.
Shabbos.